This show is all about listening to your mother. But for the next few minutes, if you listen to me tell you how I listen to mine, you just may leave here with the best parenting advice you'll ever get. Now, to set the stage, my mother, Sandy, is unique. She did a stint as a pinup girl in her youth, seriously, and something of a chameleon. An agent of perpetual reinvention, forever hopeful, optimistic, never bowing before the altar of conformity. She lights up rooms. She had me young, so by the time I was a teenager and most of my friends' moms were on the cusp of middle age, mine was barely into her 30s, which meant she had the dubious distinction, at least in my eyes anyway, of being the hot mom. So, my friend said she looked like Madonna. It was the 80s, after all. And she had a flair for the dramatic, too. Still does. She once danced with Davy Jones of the Monkees and was on a first-name basis with Joan Rivers. I'm being serious. Nowadays, when my teenage boys watch the hit sitcom Schitt's Creek, they see shades of my mother in the eccentric and flamboyant matriarch Moira Rose, played by Catherine O'Hara. When Moira says, "David," with that affectation, my boys turn to me and say, "Moira sometimes reminds me of Grandma." But as original as my mother is, her parenting advice wasn't her own, and nor was it passed down by her mother. She picked it up from a Sears portrait studio photographer in 1977. Now, for the youngsters here, these were photography studios tucked into a corner at Sears department stores that for $9.95, including 95 cents deposit through this Saturday only, would churn out 3 5x7-inch and 15 wallet-sized portraits of laughably stiff toddlers posed in unnatural positions against a backdrop of what could only be described as interstellar clouds of ionized gases. The children looked something like this. In 1977, I was one of these toddlers, and the photographer was to take my picture. He sat me down on a beige carpet in my brown plaid pants and brown socks and brown Buster Browns. Brown was very, very big at the time. In front of a brown and beige nebula, and waited for my mother to get me to smile. "Can you smile, David?" she asked. "Can you give Mommy a big smile? Can you? Can you smile for Mommy? Can you smile?" This went on for some time, to the point that my mother made a begging fool of herself and pleading with an uncooperative 2-year-old. And that's when the photographer chimed in. "You don't ask him to smile, lady," he said. "You tell him." He'd seen this scenario enough to understand something about child behavior and parenting that my mother didn't yet. My smiling for the camera wasn't really a choice, yet by asking me whether I could smile, my mother was giving me one. Parents, new and seasoned, do this all the time. They present their children with a choice in matters that really aren't up for negotiation. They ask their kids whether they'd like to put on a hat when it's 6 degrees outside. They ask them whether they can brush their teeth before bed. They ask them whether they can clear their plate from the dinner table. My wife and I fell into this trap as young parents. When my mother saw this, it was as if she had that Sears portrait studio story stowed away in her bottomless purse for 31 years, along with chewing gum, Band-Aids, chapstick Tums, sunscreen, hand cream, wet naps, stain removers, mini umbrellas, and whatever else her children could ever need in a pinch, and she knew I needed this. "David," she said. Now, I don't mean to pry or be critical, okay? Which meant, of course, that she intended to pry and be critical. But when you ask the boys whether they can do something that you know you want them to do and is good for them, don't ask them to do it. Just tell them. Because let me tell you something. What happens when their answer is no? Sandy had a point. "It's 6 degrees outside. Would you like to put a hat on?" "No, it's not cold." "It's bedtime. Can you brush your teeth?" "No, toothpaste is spicy." Could you clear your plate from the dinner table? Later, I want to play. You see where I'm going with this. Now these well-meaning parents have a problem on their hands. And I was reminded of my mother's advice recently while vacationing on the beach in Florida. A boy who had been pleasantly playing in the sand nearby began holding his private parts and doing the jig. His mother, who was nothing if not attentive, noticed his discomfort and asked, "Would you like to go to the potty?" You could see the boy's wheels turning. Would I like to go to the potty? Well, gee, Mom, now that you mention it, no. I don't want to walk over 200 yards of hot sand to the restroom. I'd prefer to stay here building sandcastles and squeezing myself. Not surprisingly, the boy said no. Then the mother began pleading. The boy began crying, and a tug of war ensued. It was no day at the beach, let me tell you. Now, no parent is perfect, least of all me, but in navigating parenthood, I've found my mother's advice to be so invaluable as to be worth sharing here. And psychologists who study parent-child relationships confirm that my mom and that Sears portrait studio photographer were onto something. They call the tell 'em, don't ask 'em approach an example of authoritative parenting. It's firm, but warm, like my mom. These parents make clear how their demands are best for the child. If the child asks why she must brush her teeth at bedtime, these parents explain cavities and the importance of good hygiene. Give the boys real choices, my mother told me. Would you like to play soccer or baseball this summer? Would you like milk or orange juice with breakfast? Because at the end of the day, those choices don't really matter, but it lets them feel like they have a say. Everyone is happier. Parents get what they want, children get what they need, and research shows that children of parents who use this tactic tend to turn out more confident and responsible. Why parents cast non-negotiable directives as questions is a bit of a mystery. Perhaps it stems from an unconscious desire to foster independence in our children. Autonomy is crucial to personal development. It empowers us to discover our interests and forge our own paths, and when the time comes, make choices about things that matter, like relationships and careers. But children don't know what's best for them. They haven't been around long enough to have perspective. That's what moms are for. Moms know what happens when you don't brush your teeth. Moms know what happens when you don't wear a hat in winter. And in the case of my mother, who at 40 reinvented herself to launch a 30-year career selling fashion on home shopping channels around the world, she knew what happens when you don't smile for the camera. Thanks, Mom.